When the doors were finally opened in 2011, they discovered nothing short of shocking. A hidden will that tore his family apart, long-lost movie memorabilia worth millions, and personal revelations that fundamentally altered our understanding of the Duke behind the Hollywood legend. The house was locked in 1979, with every letter, photograph, and possession sealed away. This is the untold story of John Wayne's fortune, the family drama that erupted after his death, and the truth that was hidden away inside his mansion. John Wayne's journey didn't. Beginning in a small Iowan town, it began in Hollywood. Born Marin Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, he was 13 years old and so large that the local newspaper considered it newsworthy. However, his size wasn't the only thing that made him unique. At the age of 3, he had a near-death experience after falling into an icy creek. If it weren't for a passing stranger who pulled him out, his story might have ended there. That moment of survival foreshadowed a lifetime of resilience, a quality that would define the man and the legend he became. His childhood wasn't easy, though, as his father's business failed, so the Morrison family left Iowa behind and headed west. In search of a new beginning, they moved to Glendale, California, where young Marin quickly developed a new identity. The local firefighters would see him walking everywhere with his Airedale Terrier Duke, and they soon began calling them Big Duke and Little Duke. From that point on, he refused to answer to anything else. Marion Morrison was gone, and Duke was born. Growing up in California, Duke had one dream: football. He was strong, fast, and determined, earning a scholarship to the University of Southern California in 1925. He joined the USC Trojans as an offensive lineman with aspirations of success, but fate had other plans. In 1927, he was working as a low-paid prop man at Fox Studios, barely making $35 per week, moving furniture, setting up props, and running errands for film crews. After a single-body surfing accident that ended badly with a sudden crash onto the sand, his shoulder was permanently injured, and his scholarship vanished along with his dreams of playing football professionally. Duke was left without football, without financial support, and without a clear future. That's when Hollywood called. However, it gave him a front-row seat to the world of movies he watched, learned, and gradually began to gain recognition. His first on-screen role was as a background football player in Brown of Harvard 1926, barely visible on screen, but that small taste of acting sparked something in him that he wanted more. Over the next 10 years, he clawed his way up Hollywood's lowest ranks between 1930 and 1939, starring in more than 80 low-budget westerns, the majority of which were unmemorable. Paychecks remained small, and his name was unknown. On some days, he barely had enough money to eat, and his go-to meal was a can of beans heated on a hot plate in his cheap apartment. By 1938, he was seriously thinking about giving up because Hollywood had sucked him up and spit him out, and his dreams were slipping away. Then, the moment that changed everything came when director John Ford saw something in Duke that the studios didn't believe. He was just another unsuccessful actor. Ford knew he needed a big role to prove himself, and opportunity presented itself with Stagecoach. The problem in 1939 was that the studio wanted a big name, like Gary Cooper, to cast an unknown actor in a major role. Ford didn't care. He fought for Duke, insisting he was the only man for the job. When the studio pushed back, Ford pushed harder, even threatening to quit the movie. Eventually, he won. Marion Morrison had once again changed, this time into John Wayne. From the moment Wayne took on the role of the Ringo Kid, the world witnessed something special. The camera zoomed in on his self-assured grin. Lasted only a few seconds, but it took 27 takes for Wayne to get it right. He was so nervous that he kept making mistakes, but when he finally got it right, it made him a star. Stagecoach was not just a hit, it was a sensation, and it earned 7 Academy Award nominations. It introduced audiences to the man who would redefine the Western genre. But despite his breakthrough success, Wayne was still treated like a second-tier actor, receiving only $3,700 for the film, which was a small portion of what Hollywood's elite were earning. In 1956, on the set of The Searchers, Ford humiliated Wayne in front of the entire crew by making him redo a simple scene, just picking up a gun, 17 times. Wayne took it without complaining, knowing that Ford's brutal methods pushed him to be his best, but it wasn't always easy. Together, They created some of the greatest films in cinema history over the next 50 years, forever changing Hollywood's idea of the Western hero. In the 1950s and 1960s, John Wayne wasn't just making movies. He was influencing American culture. His films like The Alamo and True Grit weren't just blockbusters. They were statements. His characters weren't just cowboys. They were larger-than-life heroes, and for millions of fans, he wasn't just an actor. He turned down roles in movies like High Midday and The Maltese Falcon because they didn't fit his persona. He also refused to play villains, show weakness, and compromise to the world. John Wayne was not only a legend on screen. His personal life was equally as dramatic as the roles he played behind the rugged all-American image. His love life was full of passion, betrayal, and explosive conflicts. 3 marriages, multiple affairs, and a romance that almost ended in gunfire. His life was as unpredictable as the Wild West he so frequently portrayed. His first marriage was to Josephine Sions, a quiet, deeply conflicted relationship that would only be revealed after his death. They were married in 1933, when Wayne was still trying to establish himself in Hollywood. At first, it seemed like the ideal match, and they had 4 kids together. However, as Wayne's fame increased, so did the distance between them. Hollywood required long hours, and Wayne was rarely home. His on-screen persona as a tough, independent cowboy became his real-life identity. He lived for the adventure and the fame. Josephine, on the other hand, wanted stability, a family man who would be home for dinner. By the late 1940s, their marriage was failing. The last straw was when Josephine learned of Wayne's affair with Marlene Dietrich, a legendary German actress who was one of the most glamorous women in Hollywood. Their affair lasted for almost 10 years, filled with passion, secrecy, and intense devotion. Dietrich was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was bold, fearless, and completely intoxicating. But she had no interest in marriage, and Wayne wasn't about to leave Hollywood for her. In 1945, his marriage to Josephine ended formally shortly after he wed his second wife, Esperanza Bauer, a fiery Mexican actress with a dangerous temper. In 1954, Wayne's third and final marriage was to Pilar Pett, a Peruvian actress who was nearly 20 years younger than him. They were married in 1954 and had 3 children together. For a while, it seemed as though Wayne had finally found lasting love. But one night, when Wayne returned home late from a party, Esperanza became so enraged and drunk that she grabbed a gun and aimed it at him as he walked through the door. But her jealousy turned violent. His career took precedence once more by 1973, and although they never divorced, their marriage was essentially over. Wayne moved in with his secretary Pat Stacy, who became his last companion. Rumors of other affairs followed Wayne throughout his life, and his chemistry with Maureen O'Hara, his frequent co-star, was undeniable. Fans conjectured for years that their on-screen romance went beyond the cameras, but O'Hara never confirmed it. However, her grandson later suggested that there was something genuine between them, something passionate but unsustainable. Although his life had been filled with upheaval, he had been obsessed for more than 15 years with making the Alamo a reality. He wanted full control, not just a star in the movie, and when the studios hesitated, Wayne did the unthinkable. He mortgaged almost everything he owned to finance the film himself. The budget skyrocketed to an unprecedented $12 million in 1960, and Wayne insisted on authenticity by constructing a full-scale replica of the Alamo in Texas, brick by brick. 5 million adobe bricks were utilized, and despite Wayne's enthusiasm, the Alamo failed at the box office, received multiple Oscar nominations, and struggled to recoup its enormous budget. Wayne was devastated because he had gambled everything, and the loss left him in serious financial trouble for the first time in years. The invincible cowboy appeared vulnerable, but even financial ruin couldn't stop him. In 1964, Wayne faced an even greater battle. The set was so enormous that it became a tourist attraction for years. After a lifetime of smoking up to 6 packs a day, Wayne developed cancer. Doctors found a malignant tumor in his lung and told him he had a 50% chance of survival. Most actors would have concealed their diagnosis out of fear of appearing weak, but Wayne went public and encouraged fans to get screened. Surgeons removed his entire left lung and 2 ribs, leaving him in constant pain. 5 months later, He was back on set, refusing to let illness dictate his life. His last movie, the SHOBU 1976, was painfully close to reality. He played an elderly gunfighter dying of cancer, a role that felt more like a farewell than fiction. He was weak and needed oxygen in between scenes, but he refused to let anyone see him struggle. In one particularly trying scene, his horse stumbled, almost throwing him off, and he tore a muscle in his shoulder, but he finished the scene without complaining. Wayne's fight with cancer was one he couldn't win. On June 11, 1979, he passed away at UCLA Medical. President Jimmy Carter called him a symbol of American courage, and thousands of people gathered outside his home and hospital to leave handwritten letters, flowers, and cowboy hats. However, the real shock came after his death, not from the public, but from his will. Despite decades of success, John Wayne's estate was shockingly small at the time of his death, with his fortune estimated at just $6. He was 72 years old. In comparison to other Hollywood, $85 million is about $25 million now. Legends, this was much less than anticipated. He had been one of the highest-paid actors in history, but a large portion of his wealth appeared to have disappeared. Then came the biggest surprise. He left nothing to Parar, his third wife. Although they had never formally divorced, she was completely cut out of his will. Instead, almost everything was divided among his 7 children from his first 2 marriages. The omission of Parar sparked years of conjecture. Had Wayne purposefully written her out? Had his fortune been depleted by poor investments? Or had something more covert happened to his? Wayne's financial decisions, missing assets, and family tension left questions unanswered about what really happened to his fortune and why he had chosen to exclude the woman who had supported him for decades. His final years were filled with battles, some of which he won and some of which he lost. But ultimately, the mystery was heightened by the sudden departure of his beloved yacht, Wild Goose, shortly before his death. Originally a World War II minesweeper, the yacht had been Wayne's sanctuary, spending countless days on it entertaining friends while lounging on the water and escaping Hollywood. However, just before his death, it was quietly sold for $750,000. After his death in 1979, John Wayne's Newport Beach mansion sat untouched, locked away from the world, and his belongings were stored away, never to be seen again. However, everything changed in 2011 when the doors were finally opened, revealing a time capsule of secrets, treasures, and mysteries that had been hidden for decades inside. Over 700 personal items were uncovered, each providing a rare glimpse into the private life of one of Hollywood's most. The most startling discovery was his last driver's license, a small piece of plastic that seemed inconsequential but turned into a collector's dream when it went up for auction, selling for an astounding $89,500. This was evidence that even the smallest relic of Wayne's life held immense value. Other discoveries included stacks of personal letters, handwritten notes on scripts, and never-before-seen photographs of intimate moments captured in time, capturing Wayne not as the movie star, but as the man behind the legend. In 1971, Wayne sat down for an interview with Playboy magazine. At the time, it barely made waves, but in 2019, a single tweet changed everything. Someone rediscovered the interview, and the shocking things Wayne said about black people were revealed. The letter is still a mystery, its words forever locked away. But despite all the admiration Wayne received, there was another side of his legacy that resurfaced decades later, one that outraged controversy and calls for his name to be erased from history. People who had grown up idolizing Wayne were forced to face a side of him they had never known. Was he simply a man of his time? Or was this more than the backlash? He said that he believed in white supremacy until, in his words, black people were educated to a point of responsibility. He justified the brutal treatment of Native Americans by claiming that they had been rightfully displaced. When speaking about LGBTQ+ people, he used slurs dismissing their place in society. The debate didn't stop online. It spread to real-world institutions that had long honored Wayne's name. One of the biggest targets was John Wayne Airport in Orange County, California, which was named after him in 1979 and had stood as a tribute to his legacy for decades before. But in 2020, amid nationwide protests against racism, Wayne's name, once synonymous with American heroism, was now associated with controversy. For some, this interview destroyed his legacy, proving that the man behind the cowboy hat was far from the icon he had been painted to be. Injustice activists demanded that the airport be renamed. The Orange County Democratic Party called for this, claiming that Wayne's views did not align with modern values and that his name, once a point of pride, had become a symbol of controversy. Supporters retaliated, arguing that his career and contributions outweighed his personal beliefs. His son, Ethan Wayne, publicly defended his father, claiming that his words were being unfairly used against him. The airport still bears his name today, but the question of whether we should judge a historical figure by Wayne's legacy suffered another setback in 2021 when the University of Southern California, where he had previously studied, made a daring decision. For years, the School of Cinematic Arts had put on an exhibit honoring Wayne, complete with film posters and memorabilia from his legendary career. However, as discussions about race and representation heated up, students and faculty pushed for the exhibit's removal, claiming that they wanted to create a more inclusive space. Critics saw this as an erasure of history, while supporters argued that Wayne's legacy no. The debate over John Wayne's legacy is far from over. Some people still view him as the ultimate American hero, a man who embodied strength, resiliency, and integrity. Wayne's films are still among the most iconic in film history, but for many, knowing that the man behind them held such controversial views makes them harder to watch. This moment reignited an even larger debate that goes far beyond Wayne himself. John Wayne was more than just an actor. He was an institution, a symbol of rugged American individualism, the face of Hollywood's golden era. His presence shaped the Western genre. His films became legendary, and his name became synonymous with strength, courage, and unshakable determination decades after his death. However, some view him as a symbol of outmoded values, a relic of a time when Hollywood ignored the voices of those who didn't fit the mold. His impact on film is still undeniable, but beneath the cowboy hat and larger-than-life persona, there was a man whose legacy is far more complex. His controversial remarks and the family disputes surrounding his estate have led many to wonder how he should be remembered. His words, which were preserved in a decades-old interview, revealed opinions that infuriated people in a modern world, changing how people view him. The ire over his remarks rekindled discussions about whether historical figures should be judged according to modern standards or remembered in the context of their time. Unforgivable indication that his legacy needs to be re-examined by others. His influence on American culture and cinema is too great to be forgotten. The secrets kept hidden in his Newport Beach mansion for over 30 years only deepen the mystery. The lost memorabilia, sealed letters, and odd financial choices depict a man who, despite his wealth and fame, remained elusive even in death. He was a Hollywood icon, but he was also a flawed, complex, and occasionally highly controversial person. So, should we continue to honor John Wayne as the legend he was, or should we reconsider his place in history? His image is still prominent in movies, but in a time when legacies are continually being re-examined, his name now raises concerns that were not before raised. Was he the ideal American hero or a symbol of a bygone era? Ultimately, it is up to you and history